You are listening to the So Now What podcast with Lana Manikowski, episode number 37.
So now what? These three words raced through my mind time and time again during my journey through fertility treatments. I tried desperately to have a child, but never was able. I yearned for a community to join that could understand my struggles. I couldn't find one, so I created one with the So Now What podcast. I love that you found us.
So I want to welcome everyone back to the So Now What podcast. As you know, I usually just have a quick 10 or 15 minutes each week to talk to you about how to love your life, even if you're not going to be a mom. And I've never had a guest before. And this week, I have an opportunity to present to you somebody who has been such an influence in me and how I got to where I am today. And she was the first person that taught me that I could believe differently about my life if I wasn't going to be a mom. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about how Corinne Crabtree came into my life, and then she's going to introduce herself in her own words to you. So I, like many of you, had gone through years of fertility treatments. I had been taking all these hormones, all these drugs that were causing me an exorbitant amount of weight gain. And historically, I did not have an issue with weight prior to my infertility treatments. I had a good relationship with my body. I felt great about myself. And then after years of going through infertility treatments and gaining weight and looking at my body as though it was a failure and it had failed me, I finished my infertility treatments. And then 3 years down the road, I still had these 25, 30 pounds that were sticking with me. And I used my infertility drugs and the treatments as an excuse for why I had all this weight gain. So in between now and, when I started my infertility treatments, I was 37, I would listen to Losing 100 Pounds with Corinne. It was this awesome podcast that I would listen to. And this woman just spoke to me through the airwaves. And so I thought it would only be appropriate to bring her on as my first guest, because I think so many of us have this relationship with food and comfort that we get from food in our difficult times. So Corinne is just the person you need to know if you are looking to lose your weight after infertility treatments. And I'm going to let her introduce herself to you and tell you a little bit about her and her program.
Well, that was very sweet. I was getting teared up as you were talking about your journey and stuff. Well, I'm Corinne. I did lose 100 pounds. I had battled with, unlike you, I'd battled with my weight like all my life. I always tell people the only time I was ever thin in my life was when I came out of the womb and everybody wanted the chubby baby. And like, I even got my weight wrong then. So when I had actually had a child, and that was my big impetus where I needed to change. I had been overweight all of my life, and I was terrified of passing that on to him. I had just had bouts with depression. I had to try to take my life at 17. I had been bullied all my life for my weight, including like my father had bullied me around my weight. What was amazing is I had an absentee father. And the few times that I saw him, the one thing I could like be assured of is he would comment on my weight. And so I just struggled with it for so long. And then I know that your audience struggles with, this idea that they're not going to have children. I had one, and I really struggled with having a child. His first year was just the hardest year of my life. And I had hard years. And I just woke up one day and I was so miserable and just so like down on myself about not being a good mother, about being overweight, that this was a horrible way for me to even be in my marriage, like just all the shit and shame that we all do to ourselves. And I realized I just didn't want this life anymore. But this time what was different is in my past, when I didn't want my life anymore, I had very terrible outs for myself. And this time I was like, I'm just getting my shit together. And I was like, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I got to change my life. And I just started with some small changes. And everything I talk about in the podcast is exactly how I lost weight. If I caught myself talking crappy to myself, I immediately would say, like, we can't talk to ourselves like this anymore. This does not help. This is what's always gotten us into the position of needing to eat to feel better about ourselves. And I just started making small little steps of change that I could do each day. And I did it all the way until 100 pounds came off. So that's pretty much my story. Once I lost the weight, I wanted to help other women do the same. I knew that most women are walking around these days like the walking wounded. We have, like, all of us have a story about, why we're not good enough or what's wrong with us. And my people, it's always, I've battled with my weight. I've either battled with my weight recently and I've never had to deal with it and I don't know how to deal with it, or I've done it all my life and I don't even know how to be another person. Like, I just don't even know how to put myself first. I don't know how to make small changes because all I've ever done is the crazy ass diets and stuff. And so I just wanted to help women figure it out, because we just need women to believe that I always think the first step is we have to believe first that we're better than we give ourselves credit for. We've just been conditioned most of our life, especially when it's, your weight, that something's wrong with you. And like that first step is just kind of realizing, I may have a lot of crappy thoughts, but I'm open to believing that I'm a little bit better than I give myself credit for. And I think that's what I just wanted for women. I just wanted them not to just lose weight, but I wanted them to feel good about themselves too. So that's my story.
That's beautiful. And I'm a testament that your program works. I joined Corinne's program, which is called No BS, in September of 2020. And I had a history of being on Weight Watchers. I was really good at having a goal for myself and achieving it. And the minute I achieved my goal, I would go back to eating the foods and the things that made me feel comfort, because I thought I was cured. I met my goal. I was cured. I was, this powerhouse. I could do whatever I wanted. And then things would start all over again. So I would constantly show up to the new member meeting and sit back and listen to whatever new program Weight Watchers came out with for that year and figure out how to do it. So when I started listening to your program, to you on your podcast, and then later joining your membership in September 2020, I realized that it was a lot less about the weight and the food as it was understanding why I was going for that food. So I've talked to my listeners before about buffering and how much buffering I did with food to help to keep a lot of the emotions and the sadness and the defeat I was feeling. So can you talk to us a little bit about buffering and why food is something that's so easy for us to buffer with?
Yeah. So I think the hardest thing when it comes to weight and just in anything is that internal conversation that we have. We're just not really taught to pay attention to it. All of us have an internal narrative. So for me, one thing your listeners don't know is like with my son, I had a lot of shame over just how I ate through his pregnancy. Then I had shame that I didn't connect to him. Then I had guilt and immense shame when he was 5, when he got diagnosed with autism. I took on, this is my fault. Like, I did something wrong. And then I couldn't connect to him. And I was like, what about all the other autism moms that, they look at their child and they're just having these, rainbows and daisy moments. And I'm looking at my child and I'm grieving. And I'm thinking about what I will never get. And so we're not taught that our thinking is very normal. We're not taught how to listen to it. We just believe it. And when you believe it, it's painful and it hurts. And so often, if you don't understand your thinking, you will eat to get away from it. So we're just not really instructed as humans that you are going to have a shit show of a brain. That's just the way it works. But you have creative authority over it. You can change your narrative. You can question what you're thinking. You can sit with it if you want to. But when we're not taught that our thinking's the problem, all we want to do is escape our reality because our thinking shapes our reality. So that's why I think a lot of us, food is easy to turn to. I mean, there's Uber Eats, grocery stores, fast food. What are we taught when we were kids? Like, if you get good grades, let's go out to eat. If something bad happened at school, let me make you some cookies. We're always taught that food is such a good way to take your mind off of something you feel bad about. And so I think that for a lot of us, when we're introduced to the idea that the first step is really just understanding how we speak to ourselves and stuff, and that all of it's normal and that we're not broken and that everything we think may be painful, but it's at the end of the day, it's not true. It just feels true because we've never had anybody tell us that we can think something different. Like with me, when it came to Logan, I felt like a terrible mother for a long time. That was like, if there was a book written about Corinne, it would be called like Corinne, the terrible mother of Logan. And I really had to listen to all the things that I would say. And my coach, I had a coach a few years ago who I was talking about how much shame I felt that when my child talked to me about, like he likes to talk about Russian operas. He likes to talk about, Uranus. I mean, like topics I could care less about. And he wants to talk about them relentlessly. And I would tell her, I was crying and I would say, I sit there and all I do is I think I'm a terrible mother. I should be more engaged. Like I would have all these rules of how it should be in the moment and what a bad person I was. And she just said, that's mothering. And I just started bawling. No one had ever told me that we're not all happy and we're not all just, it's not all perfect. And that sometimes, like in those moments, I don't have to be the scourge. In those moments, I can literally tell myself, and you just being here, bored out of your mind, wishing you were somewhere different, that's also mothering. And it brought on so much relief. And so like, I think about, when it comes to buffering and stuff, it's like, no wonder I stuffed my damn face all my life. No one ever told me that the shit that I thought wasn't true. It just felt really real. And that I could actually think about things in a different way. And I know a lot of your people, I have a child. A lot of your people are never going to have children. Like this is where we're at. And it's so easy to believe the narrative that our body is broken. Like something's wrong with me. I was, like normal people have kids. I'm sure there's 1,000 thoughts that your listeners have that tear them apart. And it's like in those moments, it's like thinking, like my body's not broken. This was just not my destiny. This body was meant to do other things. And then going out and figuring out what that is. And it's natural to grieve and it's natural to want the other things, but allowing yourself to be like, yeah, I wanted that. It's normal to like grieve that. It's normal to sometimes think something's wrong with me. But what's also true is that I have a body. It's meant for other things. I can decide what those things are. I can be sad, but I don't have to beat myself up anymore over this too. And I think when we start understanding those nuances, the reliance on the food goes down. And that's what I talk to my weight loss clients all the time about. It's like, y'all don't need no tricks. Y'all don't need no points. You don't need another shake program and stuff, but you do need to think differently so that you're not having the desire to escape yourself all the time.
Can you talk a little bit about how you even start believing something different? I know Corinne, if you become part of her membership, she has this awesome daily planner that we fill out as members where she gives us pointed questions, goals that we want to achieve. What do we believe about ourselves? Creating our food plan, doing all those things. But I notice for me, it was always difficult in the beginning for me to say what I liked about myself, because that's one of the questions that she asked. And I realized that it was because I was believing things that weren't helpful to me. So can you talk a little bit about how to start believing new things about yourself?
Yeah, this is actually something newer that we've just started recently teaching. I started it about 4 or 5 months ago. Believing something new about yourself is probably, like if I ever crack the code on an exact formula, oh my gosh, like Oprah will want to work with me. She will be calling.
You should.
The way that I like to teach it is there are 4 ends that we all have to kind of get behind. And because your brain, the first thing, before we even get into the 4 ends, the first thing when it comes to believing something new is you have to realize that what you do believe right now just feels true to you only because it is the only interpretation you have been allowed to repeat most of your life. So for all of us, things we think about ourselves, a lot of times it's cultural narratives, things we see on social, something someone said. It's an idea that we formulated when we were young and we didn't know any better. So we just adopted other people's opinions about us. Like one of the opinions that I adopted for a long time is I would just always be a big girl. I was told that in my family all my life. It was like, we're all overweight. And, even the thinnest of us are just big girls and blah, blah, blah. And I just believed it. You could have blown me over with a feather when someone was like, oh no, everybody is different. It doesn't, like, the genetics play 10% of a factor. I was like, what? And that took me like 30 years before I even understood that was a thing. So we get handed a lot of stuff. So that's the first thing when it comes to believing something new is you have to be open to the idea that what you currently believe might not be true. It just feels true. And it may have come from, you don't know where it came from. I don't think people have to go and find out where it all started in order to believe new things. But you do have to have this fundamental idea that beliefs are just repeated thinking that we have that we've not questioned. So if you're on board with that, then you can move into what's called the 4 ends. And the first one is notice. We have to first notice all the things that we tell ourselves. And I like to tell my clients, all my members, just assume every single thing your brain says is a bullshit lie. Don't say no, this one's true, or I could prove this. 99.9% of the things that people tell me that they want to argue is true, that they could prove it, also feels bad. I'm like, we are not on the hunt to prove true crap that makes you feel bad. That's the wrong game to play. So just assume most of everything that you think is up for a new interpretation. So you got to notice this stuff first. The second part, and I think it's the crucial part, is normalizing your thinking. For women who have been through infertility, and I have a lot of friends that have been through infertility that has not been successful. I've had some that has been successful. It would be normal to think something is wrong with your body. And it's very important for you to normalize your thinking. Otherwise, we judge our thinking. And when we judge our thinking, we feel bad about our thinking. And if we feel bad about our thinking, we will stop listening to it again. And when you stop listening to it, it now just becomes the truth again. You're just feeling bad every day, but you can't explain why. You're feeling hopeless on some days and you can't explain why. And it's because that thinking, you've turned it back down. It's still in there. You're just not paying attention to it. So when you notice your new thought, when you notice all these things, the worst thing you can do is judge your thoughts by saying things like, oh my God, I'm never going to feel better if I think this way. I'm the only one. I wouldn't want anybody to know that I ever think shit like this. I did that a lot in the beginning when it was really hard for me to admit to my coach the thoughts I was having about being a mother. I literally thought I didn't think I was the only person, but I thought only bad people thought this way. I only thought bad mothers would have these thoughts. And so when I would listen to them, I would automatically think, and that's why I'm a bad mother. And this is terrible. And so it made me not want to listen to that stuff, but then I would just feel bad. So you have to normalize everything. Every brain has 60,000 thoughts a day. Every brain is wired to most of them to be crap. That's just the way the brain works. So you ain't weird, broken, or anything else or crazy because you don't have puritanical thinking all the time. So the third step is like, once you normalize things you hear, you want to neutralize. And that is where we start getting into, rather than saying my body is broken because I can't have children. That's where we just say, I have a body and I'm not going to be having children. There's a very big difference between those two sentences. It's like we're just taking the temperature down. We're not accosting ourselves and we're not just keeping the old thought. We're just like, what inflammatory language can I remove from these sentences? When people neutralize, at first, it's important to know you may not get it all the way to neutral, but turning down the heat is helpful. And the more that you stay in the neutralizing stage, the more you get better and better and better at it. And most of us, we don't need better thoughts yet, because just getting out of the self-loathing is a huge level up. We get relief from that. We start like kind of cleansing the palate to where it's like, all right, now we're ready for the fourth step. And I call it next best thought or action. And that is where it's like, if I'm thinking I'm broken and because I can't have children, and I've been neutralizing it for a long time, it's like, I have a body and, I'm not going to have children. Then next best thought eventually could be, I have a body meant for other things. It's like just nuancing it just a little bit to where it sends you into a forward direction. Like in that last step, when it comes to like back to your original question, how do we change a belief? We change it slowly. Mm-hmm. And we change it deliberately. We don't just come up with brand new thoughts like, oh, that thought sounds great, but I don't believe it at all. Just telling yourself something you don't believe doesn't change belief. Got to start with things that you can wrap your arms around. And then you can turn the heat back up on new belief until you get to things that are radically different than what you believed, a year ago or 2 years ago or whatever.
Yeah. So the 4 N's, just to go over them: notice, normalize, neutralize, and next best thought or action.
Yeah, I threw action in there. I just started teaching this not too long ago, but I think for some people, like when you neutralize, some people don't even need a next best thought. They're just like, oh, okay, I can just start doing now. And so I was like, all right, then do something different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it's interesting. And I love how you explain that we think that we're just going to come up with this new thought or this new belief about ourselves or our story. And I tell people all the time, I believe that we need to mourn this loss of the person that we thought we were going to be, of the mother we thought we were going to be, of the children and the milestones that we were going to see in our lives based on what our children were going to accomplish and become grandparents and all this. And I believe that it's so important to sit and understand what is it you're feeling instead of looking for, the next thing that's going to bring you happiness or satisfaction. And so I love the fact that we could actually start to work on that neutralize zone, because it's so important to really take the temperature down, like you said. And I love the way that you gave that example, because our thoughts just run so rampant in our head because they're just not managed.
Right.
And so I love the 4 N's, and I'll make sure that I highlight that here in our show notes too.
Yeah, I think it's been helpful for our members because it really, I think as women, as when you talk about weight loss or you talk about not being able to have children and stuff, That neutralized part, I can't, or the normalized part, I can't even underestimate the power of that part of it. Because when you start listening to how you think about yourself, it's overwhelming at first.
Yeah.
And if you're not careful about normalizing that, you will shy away because you're inviting feeling everything that you think. And that's a big ask. That's why so many people don't do it. That's why so many people eat and drink. Yeah. It's a lot easier to eat and drink than it is to be like, hey, I just want to listen to my internal crappy ass conversation and feel some of those emotions today. It's like no one is signing up for that, but we need to sign up for it in order to have the life that we want.
And, I think about also another thing that we talk about in my community that I got from you is our future self, and really taking those 4 ends and then creating who we think we're going to be, and deciding now that it doesn't have to be what we thought it was going to be our whole lives, or what we dreamed of when we were playing house with our dolls as kids. A lot of us just always thought we were going to be moms. So in the last few minutes here, we have about 5 minutes left. I'd love for you to talk about how to believe and create this future that you just have no evidence for, and talk a little bit about that, because I gained that perspective from you being part of your membership.
Yeah, I have always been a lover of the future self concept ever since I started trying to figure out how am I going to teach people that have always believed they can't do something. So the best way that I always describe it is the first thing that we have to do is we have to just open our brain up to the idea of, can I even think about another version of me? For a lot of people, it's a big ask. So I always tell people to do it this way. If you are already a visionary, if you already love daydreaming and stuff, future self work will be your jam. So you go far out, you go to the end of the road. Like, where do you ultimately want to be? So in weight loss, I always say, some of you are going to be able to think about your future self when they've lost all of their weight. And so you do it on paper and you think about, how is she thinking? How has her life changed? What does she think about each day? What is she no longer thinking about? Which I think is also important. It's like when you think about, with your group, the version of you that is the next stage of her life where she is focused on new things, whatever they are, she's not thinking about her body being broken anymore. The future version of me doesn't think these things anymore. And she's not thinking these things because she's focused on these other things. And this is what she's thinking. And so I always just tell people, think about where your environment, think about your thoughts, think about your actions, how you carry yourself through the day. And you write all of this out. If you can't go all the way to the end of the road, then you go to the future version of me in 1 month from now. What do I want her in a month doing? So, because some people are so into their crap that it's like, I can only go so far out. So future self-work can happen in small windows or big windows. But I think the big piece is a lot of people will do the future self-work and then there's such a wide berth. There's such a disconnect. You can't just start living like her exactly now, but you have to pull to today. So if future you is no longer thinking about her, she doesn't think about her body being broken, that means you today, every single time you want to think about your body being broken, you have to remind yourself, I have a body. Because the version of you that doesn't do that anymore started somewhere. She didn't just flip a light switch on and all of a sudden her new thoughts came in. She worked deliberately each day. Maybe she wrote a letter to herself once a week that talked all about her current greatness, what makes her right. Maybe she every single day stands in the mirror and says something nice to her body, even if it feels like ass.
Wow,
in order for me to be that version of me, this version pays the tax. And rents due. So we got to show up each day and we got to do a little bit of work to become her. And so I always like to start with the end. And then I think, okay, in order to get there, what are the little things that I can't do anymore every single day? And what are the little things I got to start doing that will build me into that version? And I think that's how like future self kind of more comes together.
I love that. And, I love how you talked about writing a letter. And by the time this airs, Mother's Day will have already passed. But Mother's Day is a very triggering time in our community. And I'm actually hosting an event. It's my inaugural event called Others Day, which is going to always be the Saturday before Mother's Day. And it's an opportunity for women who aren't moms to come together and celebrate themselves. And so on the So Now What podcast, I just aired my episode on thoughts to think about Mother's Day. One of the things I offered the listeners was to write themselves their own Mother's Day card. Mm-hmm. And, show love for yourself, because we think that if we didn't show up in our lives as moms, that we just need to turn our back on ourselves and what we would have been and what we could have done. So one of the things that I had my listeners consider doing is buying themselves a Mother's Day card and just writing it out and thanking them for the person that they are today, whether they're a mom or not. So I love the idea of writing a letter to your future self, because I actually did that under your guidance. And it was so powerful to me just to see how much of that is coming true in my life today. But when we don't take ourselves to a place that we even consider what possibilities we could have for ourselves or how we could feel, we never get there, because we haven't had that conversation besides in the way back of our head, or in the, prefrontal cortex part of our head is where we're really going to come and show up for ourselves and create the things in our lives that we want to create. So that's beautiful.
I love that concept. That's awesome. Because I think one thing that's important is, mother yourself. I talk to y'all all the time about, so many of us, like we grieve the parents we didn't have. And I'm like, but this is your opportunity to parent yourself. And if you think about, like, if you're not going to have a child, think about your inner child and taking care of your inner child. I believe we all have one on the inside, and that baby needs taken care of all the time, because it's the scared one. It's the one that doesn't think rationally. And so it's an interesting thing to think about, like mothering yourself. How can I mother me, in the absence of maybe me not having a child, but that doesn't mean I can't take care of me.
And we do turn our backs on ourselves because we feel like our body didn't show up for us. So like, screw you, body. Like, right. I'm just going to eat all the Doritos and I'm going to eat all the ice cream. And I'm not going to work out because you've already proven to me that you didn't show up for me. So here's back at you. And it's such a different narrative when you choose how you want to show up. When you look in the mirror, and there's mornings I look in the mirror and I have pep talks with myself that I'm boohooing and crying to myself because I am so proud of how far I've come in my journey. And it feels so good to really truly look at yourself in the mirror and be proud of who you are after years of being ashamed of what your body hasn't done or who you've shown up being every day.
For sure.
I love that. I actually had a pep talk with myself before having you on as a guest. I was like crying to my dog, telling her how proud I was that Corinne Crabtree would actually choose to come on my podcast because, I see you as a legend and somebody who has shown me so much and allowed me I realize that I've done the work, and that's something that is very sacred. I think so important for us to not give our credit away and tell ourselves that somebody else did the work for us, because we are the ones who have taken tools from others who have experienced it before us. Or like, for example, like Corinne, she's put it in a way that it was understandable to me, but it was truly up to me to do the work on myself. So I'm just super grateful every day that I've been able to create a life that I truly love, even if I'm not a mom, because for so long that seemed like unattainable. I just saw this blank space in front of me that was full of nothing. And to really move forward and create a life depending on what I wanted for myself was scary, but at the same time, like, what a gift that I can purposefully choose what I want to fill my days with and my life with and my future with. So the future self stuff, I think, is super powerful. So thank you for sharing that. But as we're coming to a close, Corinne, I would love for you to share how our listeners can find you and all the wonderful things that you're putting out there for people to grow from and learn from.
Well, the weight loss one's the easy one. That's the Losing 100 Pounds podcast with Corinne. And you can go, I have a free weight loss course if people want to take it. It's nobsfreecourse.com. You would think I would just roll that off my tongue after I've said it 5,000 freaking times. The new thing that I have coming out, which will be launching in July, is the No BS Business Women's membership, where I've been very fortunate in my lifetime to solve two big issues that most women struggle with. One is, is weight loss. Most people are never going to lose their weight. I've lost it and kept it off for 15 years. The second one is being a woman who has built a business, and I have an 8-figure business, and to be able to grow it from scratch most of the years by myself. I now have an amazing team that I love and adore, but I even built the team, and I want to be able to help other women who feel like they can't have that dream job, that they feel like they can't start a business. They don't know what to do. They get in their own way. That will be launching in July. But if you are interested, for now, you can go to nobsbusinesswomen.com and you can get on the wait list. We are just doing a wait list right now. One of the things I'm telling everybody is I'm starting it scrappy and starting it simple, so I can teach everybody that you don't have to be fancy in the beginning to do things. Right. So threw up my wait list, but that's where you can go and get information there.
Don't you have Facebook lives about the No BS?
Yes, I have the business Facebook Live is the second Tuesday of every month at 10 a.m. Central Time. And then there's a free weight loss Q&A on the third Tuesday of every month at 10 a.m. So I have my podcast. I do a couple Facebook Lives. I have a free course. There will be, I'm sure, something that I will do over on the business membership side that people can sign up for. But for now, it's just, I just have a passion to make sure that every woman has what she needs to pursue her dreams. And the two dreams that I specialize in is building businesses and then losing weight. So anything I can do to help women do those things, I'm just all in every day on it.
Love it. And, our community is just, I think, searching to know that they can feel better and do better for themselves in the future. Mm-hmm. And I just know that, I'm an example. I mean, we use that phrase a lot, amongst our life coach school community, but I'm the example of what's possible. And you've been the example to me of what's possible as far as, building your dreams and committing to yourself and showing up for yourself and loving yourself again. So thank you very much for joining us today. And I know that a lot of my listeners are going to benefit so much from all the tools that you have to offer. Thank you all for listening in this week. And I am so glad that you had an opportunity to meet Corinne and hear more about all the wonderful things that she is offering in this world. Make sure you're following her on Instagram and on Facebook. She told you her dates for her lives. And have an awesome week. And remember, it is never too late to discover your meaning. I'll talk to you all next week.